You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties.
Join us.
Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era, improv news stories, and incessantly pester our friends and family to check out all the pop culture stuff that we obsess over so we can have more people to discuss the obscurest trivial minutia with and otaku squee about all our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we were raised by rentals. Mike! I just mentioned that we were here to foist all of our favorite fandom things on the people foolish enough to listen to us. But actually, today's Super Gushers episode isn't really about any particular pop culture thing, but rather on one of the holiest days of the year for nerdy, geeky folks like us, kids big and small, which is, of course, Halloween.
Woohoo! I would have otaku squeed, but my throat is bad today. I'm still getting over that cold.
That's okay. I don't think I ever used otaku squee as a verb before.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. I was like, oh shit, don't laugh.
You'd be surprised at how long it takes me to write those intros.
They always get me. That's so it's totally worth it.
Oh gosh, so now it's like the challenge of trying to write good ones every single time. Back in the early episodes, like sometimes I go back and listen to them to go like look stuff up, and I'm like, oh, these are so boring. Like I spend more time on them now.
It's like that episode of Bob's Burgers where he has all the stress from having to do the burger board every day. He was just like, oh god, I can't keep doing it.
Oh, I know, right? The one time we started recording and I forgot to write one, and I was just like, like trying to come up with one on the fly. Like, I can't do it. Anyway.
Oh, good times.
As I mentioned, this is a Super Gushers episode, and believe it or not, it's actually the first Super Gushers special that we've done this season. The first one of the year.
Holy crap, really?
Yeah, I don't know how we got all the way to October without doing a Super Gushers. Not only that, it's been more than a year because the last Super Gushers episode was from July of 2023, a year almost and a half from when we're recording this now in October 2024. That was when we had Sam Granquist on for our Secret Origins Revealed episode.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's been a while.
Yeah, I don't know why it's been so long. We probably should remind people listening now, or if you're a newcomer, the Super Gushers episodes are specials we do occasionally where instead of improving a story or going on a rental rant about something that pisses us off, instead, we're going to just spend some time talking about something that doesn't piss us off, something that we in fact love, and just gush about it. And yeah, the topic for this episode is very topical this season in spoopy season, which is, of course, Halloween.
Woo! My second favorite holiday.
Yes, it's probably my first favorite. I'm gonna guess Christmas is your first favorite. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And here's the thing: like, I'm a giant child at heart. Like everybody that knows me knows I love toys. I love nerdy stuff. I love childlike things. But I also love to make toys, and I'm a big jolly fat guy with a beard, so I kind of relate. But also, like, I just have so many really good memories from like friend get-togethers and family get-togethers and stuff. Like, so Christmas is my number one, but Halloween is right behind it. Like, it's neck and neck. Christmas just kind of ekes it out by a couple notches, and I think that's only because I have a lot more heartfelt memories from Christmas. But damn, I got some great memories from Halloween.
Yeah, I think my reasoning for flipping the order of those is pretty similar, and just that Halloween has some better memories for me. I don't really like Christmas like as a concept, but I have so many good memories around it. And I love Christmas movies and Christmas music and Christmas decorations. Like, I like all the trappings of Christmas more than I care for the actual holiday and like the gift giving stuff. Like, I know, you're obviously like, that's a big part of it for you. I don't really care about that kind of stuff, but I just like the vibes,
Oh yeah, no, I tell you right now, like, one of my favorite things now that I have enough seniority to take off time in Christmas and around Halloween. What I end up doing is just at least once or twice while I'm on vacation is just sitting in a dark living room with all the Christmas lights on, watching random Christmas movies while sitting there sipping like a, coffee with some whiskey in it, or just enjoying myself. And man, I'm so happy every time I do that. Like just that quiet moment of enjoying the lights and enjoying the movies. Ah, fantastic. But we're not here to talk about Christmas. We're here to talk about Halloween, damn it. So
Yes. We are here to talk about Halloween. We are gonna gush about Halloween.
I'm gonna gush all over it. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, don't make it weird. Too late.
Come on, who are you talking to? It's always good.
So we talked a little bit in some previous episodes, including last Halloween in whatever our Halloween special was. Trick or Treat, that's what it was. We did our Trick or Treat Good to Eat Halloween special last year. We've put out our spooky season special so far this year. By the time people are listening to this, it should be Halloween or the week thereof. So at the risk of repeating things we've mentioned in previous episodes, I just wanted to touch a little bit on some traditions and some things that we like to do around Halloween time. But more specifically, I think we should psychoanalyze ourselves a little bit, go back to childhood and figure out why it is that we love Halloween so much. What was it when we were kids in the 80s and 90s, the Gen X millennial generation? What was it that made Halloween so great?
I mean, for me, one of the things immediately is just that I love fall in general. I love the look of fall. I love the smell of fall. Like, I know that's weird to say because it's just like rotting leaves. But I fucking love the way that the air smells. There's like a crispness to it. The look of it. I know it's mostly gray skies, but still gray skies, but colorful leaves. Like it just looks beautiful. So that has always been a big thing for me, just the vibe in general. But I've also grown up watching spooky movies. Like, I had an older brother and sister who constantly exposed me to scary shit. So I watched a lot of scary movies. So by the time I was like 6, I was all in on creepy stuff and things that go bump in the night. So for me, it was like, oh, a holiday where we celebrate monsters and ghosts and ghouls. That's awesome. So that was a huge part of it for me.
Yeah, hell yeah. I would absolutely agree with that, especially about fall, autumn being the best time of the year. For me, it is. It's my favorite season. It always was growing up for the same reasons, that petrichor smell in the air and everything is like crisp and cool. It's sweater weather. You can kind of bundle up and get cozy. And I always think of things like hot chocolate and apple cider and apple pies. And, eventually Thanksgiving is coming up and like a big hearty meal and like all those things that are tied up with autumn. Unfortunately, I've been living in Texas for the last decade and a half, and where I live in the Austin area and previously in El Paso, it's so fucking hot late into the year. It doesn't really start getting cold until like December. So there really isn't much of an autumn. We don't get leaves that really fall off the trees. If we do, it's just like a little bit. A lot of the trees down here are either evergreens or they really just keep their leafy leaves all year. Even the big oaks don't really lose their leaves that much, so I kind of miss that. I don't have that autumn sensation anymore, and I'm kind of bummed that my kids haven't grown up with that experience. They've grown up knowing about it, and they see it in movies and they want that, in the same way that I always wanted to live in New York City when I was a kid, because you see it in movies and how cool it is. But if I have any regrets as an adult, it's that I wish that I could have got my kids to experience the autumn weather more than I was able to. But since we're talking about, our childhoods, yeah, I think the weather more than anything else. Also the shorter days, it gets darker earlier. And it's almost like every evening is just like a spooky day.
Yeah. And I'm clearly a night owl because I've been working a night job for more of my life than I haven't. That kind of freaked me out when I realized that. I was like, wait a second. I started that job when I was 20. I'm 44. I've officially been awake at night for more of my life than I haven't been. So I am officially nocturnal. But yeah, I've always been a night owl. So having the shorter days was always nice. I always liked it, that it would get kind of dark and spooky by 6 p.m. So it's I still had hours before bedtime. I could watch plenty of horror movies while it's dark out.
Yes, exactly. Or just experience nighttime. I used to take lots of walks at night.
Mm-hmm.
I like the shorter days. I would much rather be outside in the nighttime. I have a lot of tattoos and I'm pale, so I don't like the sun. It's not a good fit for me living in Texas.
Right.
But as a kid, yeah, I absolutely liked watching horror movies too. And even before horror movies, there were Halloween specials, which I
Yes.
love so much. There was something about that time of year, and it happens at Christmas time too, where every like network television sitcom has to do their holiday special, right? So they do their
Mm-hmm.
Halloween special. You would see that on, and I'm just trying to think of sitcoms like Family Matters and like Home Improvement. My favorite ones were always the ones they did on Roseanne. Those were like
Mm-hmm.
next level Halloween specials.
The Roseanne Halloween specials are some of the best in television history. They are so fucking good.
Yeah, and I loved Roseanne when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, Roseanne herself reminds me of my mother so much that yeah, I always really identified with the kids in the Connor family. I didn't have like the popular older sister, and I wasn't, like the jock younger sister or like the ignored little kid. Like we didn't really have those archetypes in our family, but I always identified with the Connors so much. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
their Halloween specials like really just hit home. Like, oh man, these guys are so cool.
Yep. No, I totally agree. Like, and again, growing up in like a lower middle class family, I 100% identified with them. And the fucking couch, the couch that they had with the like Afghan over the back, every fucking couch I had growing up looked like that.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Our whole house looked like their house. I watch
Same.
reruns now. Like a few years ago, when the reruns started playing on streaming, I'd watch the episodes, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd get more nostalgic about the fashion and the house and stuff than I did
Same.
about the plot lines of the episodes.
Dude, I did the same fucking thing. You know how they have the Godzilla in there, like in their living room?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. When me and my brother, like I was still playing with toys, my brother was kind of getting out of toys, but my mom had one of the old, I think it was Bandai, but my brother had a bunch of like the hollow kind of PVC Godzilla figures. And he was getting out of his toys. She had one Godzilla that she put up on a bookshelf in our living room. So every time I saw the Godzilla in Roseanne, I was like, "Hey, we got one like that."
But yeah, I related to it quite a bit. But in addition to Roseanne, there was these specials that would play. In my memory, I remember them being on network TV like every year as a kid. It was like this block of shows that I would watch, and the one that I immediately always would think of is Garfield's Halloween Adventure,
Mm-hmm.
which I love. And then the Garfield Christmas special is still one that I have to watch every single year. Uh,
Absolutely.
and I have a giant comic book collection, and the only Garfield comics that I allow in my collection is the graphic novelization of Garfield's Christmas special.
Nice.
I'd love to find the Halloween Adventure one, but it's kind of rare. But there was that one, and then Disney Channel would play The Legend of Sleepy Hollow,
Hell
which
yeah.
that created a lifelong obsession with the Headless Horseman for me.
Mm-hmm.
I literally was at Home Depot yesterday and stood for entirely too long staring at an animatronic Headless Horseman that looked so cool and debating if it was going to be worth the $260. I'm like, ultimately the answer is no, but man, I was really thinking about it.
There's a guy in my neighborhood that has a big headless horseman in his front yard. It might be the same one you're talking about, because he also has the Home Depot giant skeletons.
Yes. I
But
have a Home
yeah,
Depot giant skeleton. I got mine on special though.
I still don't have one. But he's got two. He's got the regular skeleton, and then the one that looks kind of like it's almost like made out of like tree bark, like the
Hmm.
weird,
Yeah.
and it's got like the pumpkin head. He's got that one, and then he's got like a bunch of life-size skeletons that he always arranges in a different pattern on his porch. This year it looks like they're kind of having a party. Like they got like drinks in their hands and shit. But now
Nice.
he also has the headless horseman in his yard. And that's one thing I love about this neighborhood. When Jess and I first moved here, we had no idea how much into the holidays this neighborhood gets. Halloween is outstanding. I love taking Caleb trick or treating, and I'm really hoping that I can still take him trick-or-treating this year. He's 12. He's
Mhm.
kind of hemming and hawing. I'm like, oh shit, last year might have been the last time I get to go. But I love walking around the neighborhood because everyone's yards are decked out. Like, there's this one couple that puts on like a freaking seance in their yard. Like, they have like a giant cauldron with like dry ice that's like bubbling, and they
Mhm.
have like all these like torches. It's creepy as hell. But then you have like one guy that dresses up like Pennywise or like chases people. Yeah, like it's crazy the amount of fun stuff going on just on my street on around Halloween. And then Christmas is the same way. Everyone's houses are lit up. They got the giant inflatables, tons of stuff. But Halloween is like next level in this neighborhood, which reminds me of the neighborhood I grew up in. We will get to that, but I know we're still talking about specials at the moment. But man, 22nd Street in Niagara Falls around Halloween, that place was fucking lit, man. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought it up, and we'll get back to the TV and movies and stuff in a minute. Because my neighborhood where I live now is the exact same way. It is fucking amazing for Halloween. And I've lived in a couple of different neighborhoods in this town, and we would always drive to like better neighborhoods to go trick or treating, places where you'd have lots of houses that decorated and lots of kids. And now I live on that street, and in my neighborhood, it's a subdivision and we have like a Facebook group and like an HOA. So they put on a Halloween contest for decorations and for costumes. My particular street is the hub of the whole neighborhood on Halloween. Every single house 2 blocks down is decorated. People are outside giving out candy. Everyone's dressed up. People come from other neighborhoods to come to the street that I live on. And there's guys down the street who do home brewing, and they'll hand out like cups to the adults, we have Jello shot fairies that we'll hand out also to the
Nice.
adults. Lots of great, great decorations. There's a guy around the corner who is a contractor. He owns a pretty big business, and he also does Halloween decorations. Like you can pay him to come and decorate your house. So his neighborhood is like the showcase. It's the best one. He's got all of the giant 12-foot skeletons and werewolves and ghouls and lights, permanent Halloween or permanent holiday lights. I mean, it's amazing. There's a house around the corner that year round people refer to it as the clown house because
Oh, that's
of
awesome.
the creepy clowns that are always outside and in their garage and stuff. And it's like a landmark because it's right across the street from the little park on the corner, like the city park. So whenever you hear people talking about, oh, like which part of the park was he at, because the park is 2 blocks long in between some of the houses, and so it's like, oh, is it at like the Folsom end or is it at the clown house end?
That's awesome.
Yeah, people dress up in super elaborate costumes. Yeah, it's awesome. Like we have to like make sure that we up our game. We can't slack off on Halloween in this neighborhood. And my neighborhood growing up was kind of the same way. I lived in Niagara Falls on Pine Avenue on 8th Street, and it wasn't that the neighborhood really decorated that much because they really didn't. But everybody gave out awesome candy. Like my
Oh yeah.
grandfather, who lived upstairs from us, he was the best one. People would come from all over because he would give out quart-size Ziploc bags crammed with full-size candy bars.
Holy crap.
Yeah, it was insane. So yeah, the trick-or-treating, I, fell away from it as an adult, but now I enjoy it just as much as I did when I was a kid because the neighborhood makes it so fun.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like in this neighborhood, we have a few houses that are very adamant about giving stuff to the parents that are, trick or treating with the kids. Like there's this one house, they have all these like handmade wooden decorations that are just freaking rad. They got like a graveyard in their front yard with like wooden zombie arms reaching up out of the grave. Like it's so cool. But every time, like the lady that lives there, she'll give Caleb the treats, and she's like, "Now give this to your dad," and she'll give him like a little sandwich baggie with like pretzels and candies in it. But there's a few people like that. They're like, "Oh no, Dad, come up here, get some candy." It's like that's cool.
Yeah, in our neighborhood, there were some people in the Facebook group, which is kind of like a neighborhood watch, and they were trying to complain about, tell your teenagers to stay at home on Halloween. That was the first year, and everybody fucking
Ugh.
dogpiled on him. No, everybody dogpiled on him and told him to shut
Oh,
the fuck
good.
up. So now it's like everybody goes trick or treating, even adults. Like literally everybody
Yeah.
goes. Oh, and I can't forget. I don't know from Cars. So whatever the car is that Michael Myers drives in that first Halloween movie that he like steals from the nurse, right?
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
My neighbor around the corner has a car that looks really similar to that, and it's always parked out on the street. But then on Halloween, he puts a Michael Myers like full size mannequin in the car, and it sits there all night. And then occasionally he will go out in his own costume and drive around the neighborhood. So you think it's like, wait, was that a mannequin or not? Like he's because fucking Michael Myers is driving around the neighborhood.
Oh, that is freaking rad.
It's so cool.
Oh,
But yeah,
man, that's
back
funny.
back to Halloween specials. The Garfield Halloween Adventure is an awesome trick or treating story, and another one that I love that I totally forgot about. And every year I would have these memories of this very particular animation, and I could never figure out what it was. And I finally realized it was because I was trying to search for 80s Halloween specials, and then eventually realized that it was from the 70s, 1978 specifically, Rankin Productions of Witches Night Out.
Yes, I freaking love that special. And I think I might have told you this in the past, but I know the guy who did the artwork for that, Jonathan Rogers. Like I met him years ago at an event, and we're Facebook buddies.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so
no,
cool.
he moved here. God, well over a decade ago, I think at this point. But he was involved with the NAC, which is the old Niagara Falls High School, the big like art installation now. I used to be involved with their holiday market that they would do. And that's how I first met him, was he was doing stuff there. And then we both ended up at an event, like a Halloween event, selling our wares. I had my prints and my books and all that, and he had DVDs and posters of his paintings. Really talented artist. Like, his work is beautiful. But we got to talking, and he wanted a copy of Mage Magnus, and I wanted a copy of Witches Night Out, so we just swap seed.
That's
now
so cool.
I have a signed DVD from him, and it's I love that special so much.
It's so freaking cool. Yeah, and Gilda Radner does the voice of the witch. Oh, I love it. I'm so happy when I finally figured out what it was so I could watch it again.
It's what it is about the style that I like so much is it's this was a lot in the 70s and even the 80s. There's like these solid color characters. So it's like you have the one character that is like the witch, she's actually multi-colors were used on her. But then you have all these other characters that are just like solid pink, solid blue, solid purple. And that was something you saw in a lot of old school animation that you don't see nowadays. And I don't know if it was just a cutting corners method or if it was just a stylistic choice, but I like it. I don't know why I like it so much, but I like just the bright, solid colors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it probably was a stylistic choice because I can picture a handful of classic like YA children's novels from those time periods that had similar artwork and these like sort of like flat color abstract shapes that represent like people or monsters or whatever. But yeah, I absolutely love it. And then speaking of which, in our I think it was our last episode, I went on a rave about how I used to think that Harry Potter was a big ripoff of Neil Gaiman's Books of Magic comic book, but there was another story that I used to think that Harry Potter was just ripping off, which is the absolutely fabulous movie The Worst Witch.
Oh my God, yes. That freaking song by Tim Curry. Holy crap.
I absolutely love that. What's it called? What's his name? The Grand Wizard, right?
Yes.
Oh, it's so cool. Mildred Hubble, The Worst Witch. Oh shit, I need to go watch that. I'm gonna go watch that later on.
Absolutely.
Getting all nostalgic about it.
I haven't watched it every year, but that is definitely a couple years ago I watched it. It's one of those, like, it'll cycle back through. I don't know. I don't put it up there as a huge Halloween special for me, but definitely from childhood. I watched the hell out of it back then.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a really long time. I always think of it as one of those specials that I loved as a kid, but for some reason I haven't revisited it. So yeah, I'm gonna try to fix that. But what about you, Mike? What did I miss? What were some other good like Halloween specials? Like yeah, spooky movies, but I'm thinking of like cool like family cartoons or whatever. Anything come to mind?
I mean, for me, it's The Great Pumpkin.
Oh God,
Like,
yeah. How did I forget that?
I have to watch that every year. Like, I still watch that every year. But yes, the Garfield Halloween special is another one that I try to watch every year. I haven't seen this much as an adult, but as a kid, I remember, Halloween is Grinch Night. Now, I've seen a lot of people. seen a lot of people talking about it on Facebook, but like I haven't seen it since I was a kid, so I might have to dig that out. But I remember watching it as a kid being like, wait, there's a Halloween version? Like, and being so blown away by it.
Shit, I completely forgot that even existed until you just mentioned it. You're right.
Yeah.
I can remember it now. Like as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, memory unlocked. Holy shit.
Yeah, no, that was always a great one. And like you said, the Sleepy Hollow. What was it? Was it Sleepy Hollow and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride? Was that the?
Yeah, I don't know what the official title is, but yeah, those two stories were together in like one movie.
Yeah, because I used to rent it throughout the year, like when it wasn't on TV, and because I loved the Headless Horseman so much, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. One of the ones that I used to watch is not a special, but it's a movie that they would play every year. This was starting in the 90s, so it was like going into my teen years. But The Witches, the one that was based on the Roald Dahl book.
Yeah, I love the book. I love the movie. Yeah, isn't Angelica Houston the head witch in that?
I believe so, yes. And like the kid gets turned into the mouse and all.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking love that movie so much. I know they did a remake. I never got a chance to watch it, but that original I will go back and watch every couple of years. I'm trying to think, like, I know there was a lot of shows that had the Halloween episode. Like I know Home Improvement did them a bunch. Obviously, we talked about Roseanne. If I'm not wrong, I think even Cheers did a couple. Like I remember watching like the I don't want to say like must see TV, but that like block of television shows that was like Monday through Friday. Yeah, like from 5 o'clock to like 9 o'clock, you had the reruns and all that. A lot of those shows did their Halloween specials, like Night Court always did fun Halloween specials.
That's right.
I remember watching a lot of that as a kid. That it was just like, oh, this is the Halloween episode of whatever show I'm watching. And they did the same thing with Christmas.
I think that goes back to something we don't have anymore, which is this TV monoculture where everybody had the same like 3 or 4 network channels that just aired TV shows at the time that they were on. You couldn't stream them. You couldn't like pause them and rewind them. And so like, yeah, like you mentioned, like, Must See TV or TGIF, like, there would be those nights where you would watch like Step by Step and Family Matters and like everybody saw the same episodes,
And it was like, even if you weren't into one of the shows, because it came on first and you were already watching TV, you're like, well, I guess I'll watch it. Waiting for the show you wanted to watch.
Yeah. Or sometimes I'd watch shows just because people would talk about them and they would just get into, the monoculture, the zeitgeist. And it was like everybody would be talking about, I don't know, Friends, like when that came out. And I was like, I thought it looked dumb, but like, okay, I guess I have to watch that, or like 90210 because people are talking about it. Like I don't understand the jokes of like the stand-up comedians on the Jay Leno show because I haven't watched, the popular TV shows.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, that's how I ended up loving Seinfeld so much, because everyone kept talking about Friends, and Seinfeld, the reruns of Seinfeld were on right after Friends. And I would watch Friends with my sister, and then like I started watching Seinfeld, and I'm like, this is way better. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And I fell in love with Seinfeld because of watching Friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, people our age used to always watch Looney Tunes as well, like classic Looney Tunes. I mean, we're talking about cartoons from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, but because they would play them on network television as like filler in the middle of the afternoon, or like in the late at night or in the middle of the night, you could turn on a random channel and just watch like Bugs Bunny cartoons. And I feel like people our age were always doing that. I mean, it spawned like Tiny Toons and Space Jam. And the reason I bring it up is because it's not necessarily a Halloween special, but one of those shows that I used to always watch around Halloween because it would just be on was, do you remember Daffy Duck's Quackbusters?
Oh my God, I loved that. Holy crap. I forgot about that. It was so good.
Yes, it was like Daffy Duck and Porky Pig were like hard-boiled detectives who investigated like supernatural stuff, like a possessed woman and like a monster. And it was like a bunch of like little clips that they strung together with this like framing sequence. I fucking loved it.
And they played it on HBO a lot too, like around Halloween.
Yeah.
Because I remember watching it on HBO all the time. But yeah, and it was totally a clip show. It was literally like, oh, Daffy Duck versus Gossamer. Like, let's put it in here. Like, I completely forgot about the damn memory unlock.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go watch that Halloween Grinch special now, so you can go watch Quackbusters.
Exactly.
So that's so
Oh
cool.
man. But yeah, like there were so many of those, and then like even just our regular cartoons, like you mentioned, Tiny Toons. Like I remember Tiny Toons had some Halloween stuff. You had I want to say Animaniacs did one, but there was a bunch of like that I know like Ninja Turtles did Halloween stuff all the time.
Hmm.
There was all of these like the Saturday morning cartoons that would have their Halloween specials. Like it was just such a thing back then, and now it really isn't. Like even going so far as like when South Park came on the air, every year they had a Halloween special. They've continued it for a while. I know the last couple of years they didn't always do one, but it was something to look forward to every year. It was like, oh, I wonder what this year's Halloween special is going to be like.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I never really looked forward to the Christmas specials because I feel like the plots were always kind of the same. They were always very saccharine stories about, learning a lesson about how family is really more important than gift giving. And there would
Hmm.
always be a character who turned out to secretly be Santa Claus, you know?
Right. So that's why I like the South Park ones, because it was always about like poo and weird demonic animals.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely some weird ones. But I feel like even the most family friendly TV shows would do fun Halloween specials. So those were always guaranteed to probably be more interesting than the same old Christmas story, on like Full House or something.
Right.
But what else, Mike? What else when you think about Halloween as a kid? Like, what else besides TV and stuff like got you, to be like a lifelong Halloween lover? Can you think of anything else?
Oh, the first thing that comes to mind is figuring out and putting together a costume. That was some of the most fun. Was like, and it was a big deal as a kid. Like I know it's a big deal as an adult. Everyone wants to have that cool costume, but as a kid, man, there was like that. Okay, it has to be topical. It has to be cool and recognizable. And
Hmm.
there was that whole thing of like first trying to figure it out. Like so September, we're getting close to Halloween. You start thinking about like what am I going to dress up this year? And then you start seeing the stores start to put out their masks. And back when we were kids, and even before us, but there was I forget what they're called, but like the package masks. Like obviously Ben Cooper and like
Hmm.
Collegeville were the brands, but
Yeah.
there was like that like whole pack where it was like you get the plastic mask and the vinyl smock and sometimes the vinyl pants. Um, and it wouldn't be like okay, let's say you're dressing up like Frankenstein. It wouldn't be like his outfit. It would be your mask, and then it would be this vinyl smock that just said Frankenstein on it. Like so everyone knew what you were. But like again, those were some of the coolest fucking things. And like it wasn't just for Halloween for me. Like a lot of them were like dress up play value too. So like I remember, God, I think I was in kindergarten, and even though I was already going to dress up like a ninja, like that was decided, I was gonna be a ninja.
Hmm.
We were at freaking Kmart, and I'm sure you remember the Kmart Halloween section of the 80s.
Oh yeah.
Just like those aisles, just fucking rows of like plastic and vinyl outfits, and then like you have the big rubber masks that was the aisle I was a little scared to go down by myself, because
Yep.
it was all the fucking like creepy ass masks on in a row, and you're like what if they come to life? It's like this, just that spooky moment. But yeah, like I remember getting. Do you remember the movie Krull?
Oh God, yeah. Vaguely, I haven't seen it in forever.
The fucking Cyclops from Krull
Oh, okay.
had one of those like vinyl outfit and plastic masks. And it was funny because it was just like, it still had two eye holes, but there was a big giant eyeball in its forehead. Um, and my mom bought that for me because I was like freaking out about it because I loved that movie. So at that point, it was just like that mask became like a dress up mask. Like me and my friends would be outside like playing with swords and toys, and I would be the Cyclops. Like, but it was like those Halloween masks were such a part of my play as a kid that I immediately think about dressing up. That's like one of my favorite things about Halloween.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know my kids really like it. In fact, my son has been in the garage off and on over the past couple of days constructing his costume for this year. I'm not even sure exactly what it is. I've given him some like construction hints on, making sure that it's going to be sturdy and whatever. But I mean, he's got spray paint and wire, like armature and styrofoam and like fabric and all kinds of stuff. So we'll see. He's got a vision, and he's a creative dude with an engineer's brain. So I know it's going to be cool.
Nice.
And he likes monsters, so I'm sure it'll be something really creepy. He doesn't typically go for characters you would know from pop culture, like he did when he was younger. He went as like Kylo Ren one year, and Captain America. But now, the past couple of years, he has either made a costume that was some kind of a monster, or if we bought a costume like in a bag, it was some kind of a creature. Like we go to Spirit Halloween, and there's like a bag that just has like waterlogged zombie, and that's what he wants to be. Or
Right.
wear one of those, like, what do you call those, like skin suits where it's like you like just look through the fabric where you look like a mannequin or whatever. I forget what they're called.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I forget the name too.
Yeah, he had one that was kind of like that, but there was like a big, like creepy, like Japanese, like monster spirit face, and then it had like long fingers. And just something about it. Spirit Halloween.
Was it like all gray with like a black mouth?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's oh God, what is it called? It's one of the SCPs. The only reason I know this is because Caleb was obsessed with SCPs for a while, so I was reading about it.
That's probably what it was, and I just didn't recognize it. But at Spirit Halloween, it's always like the generic name on the bag, like it can't be like the actual character,
Mm-hmm.
But as a kid, I never really got into costumes too much, and I still don't. I do dress up, but I'm definitely that guy that does like the bare minimum thing, so I can be part of like the crew, but I don't really want to go like above and beyond. Like it was so easy when I got to be Jim Hopper from Stranger Things when the whole family did a family costume, and I was like, oh, this is so easy,
Exactly.
In fact, I already had the shirt because in Stranger Things season 2, when Jim Hopper orders that, like, it's like a pink, white, and teal like dress up shirt to like go on a date with Joyce. It's like, I just immediately bought the shirt.
Nice.
But anyway, so as a kid, I would do what my son used to do, which is I would either just wear some generic costume, or I would get a costume that had accessories that I knew I could use later. Like, I was a ninja one year because I knew I'd be able to get cool plastic swords, and my mom would only not buy me, but I could get like, throwing stars and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I remember my ninja costume. I had nunchucks and a kama, and I thought it was the coolest shit ever.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, that's the only way I was allowed to have nunchucks, is because they were plastic and they came with my costume. And so sometimes I would repeat the costumes because I wanted the accessories. And I forget what episode it was, but in a recent episode we were talking, and I was like, I don't really like vampire lore that much. They're not really my favorite like movie monsters. I'm more into like, I love Gilman and werewolves and stuff like that. I don't tend to enjoy vampire fiction, but I do like the gothic romance ones. I mean, I know it's creepy that like vampires shouldn't fall in love with like their food, but I like the gothic romance of like Dracula and Interview with the Vampire and stuff like that. So I was Dracula, I think 3 years in a row, because I got to wear like a cool suit and have a big cloak with like red lining and have like cool fangs and have lots of fake blood that I would like I'd constantly be squirting into my mouth and then drooling out.
Oh God, yeah. No, I feel like every kid did the Dracula costume at least once in our age bracket, because I did the same thing, and again for the same reason. I got to drool blood and wear a cool cape, and it was like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. And I got to wear fangs, like hell yeah. Because I've gone on record as saying, like, I'm not a big fan of the romantic type vampires. I like the snarling bat-like monster versions. But I also, story-wise, I love Dracula. Like, I think I do enjoy, like, and I love Interview with the Vampire. Like, I love those types of stories. But the monster itself, like, if we're talking vampire monsters, I always prefer the more From Dusk Till Dawn, Stakeland, 30 Days of Night style vampire where they're just fucking monsters. But I definitely dressed up as the gothic vampire because I was like, ooh, cape and blood, yes.
Yeah, and then it was like, I did it a couple years in a row, partly because I don't really get into costumes, and partly because I was like building up my costume repertoire. Like, I had like the best Dracula costume like by that third year because
Yep.
I could get like more stuff to go with it, But yeah, trick or treating was so fun as a kid too because not only candy, obviously, but back then we could stay out late. We would go out until we hit every house in the neighborhood and the next neighborhood
Yep.
and the next neighborhood. And parents were more lax back then about wait, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know what your kids are?
Well, and I remember that as a kid, especially in the 80s, like when I was living on 22nd Street, there were still people out trick-or-treating after 10 o'clock. Like the rule of thumb was once your porch light was off, don't go to that house.
Yep.
And I mean, that still kind of is the rule of thumb. But like, I remember going out, like the street lights were on and we're walking back from like, we'd make it all the way down to Pine Avenue from where I was on 22nd. Like we were before Linwood on 22nd. So we were pretty far back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's pretty far back.
And we would do all the side streets all the way up to Pine. And if we made it to Pine early enough, we'd go to like the Como and Mario's and like trick or treat there too, because they'd always give out stuff. But when we'd be walking back, we'd be hitting any houses we missed. So if the lights were still on, we would knock on the damn door. It'd be like 9:30 at night. People are still handing out handfuls of candy, or you'd get really lucky and you'd get the people that were like, hey, we're just about to turn off our light. Here's the rest. And they would just dump the bowl. And you'd be like, fuck yeah, score.
Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, and I lived downtown on Pine Avenue, Pine and 8th, and it was a pretty busy neighborhood. But I mean, there's this sort of like ladder shape of Pine Avenue, Walnut Avenue, Ferry Ave, like Niagara Street, like Buffalo Ave isn't that far away. I haven't lived there in a long time, so I'm trying to picture it in my head. But then, yeah, all the numbered streets from like 3rd up. And my brother and I would go on like a mission to like, this is basically, with a few exceptions of weird diagonal roads like Portage, it was like a big rectangular grid. So we would go up one and down the other and up one and down the other. And man, we were determined to go everywhere, to hit every one of the numbered streets that we could walk to, probably up to about Hyde Park, which is like our limit. And and if we still had a little bit of energy left, like we'd be like, all right, well, let's go hit like Frankie's Donuts and start heading over, toward like the streets that were off of Main Street, like Elmwood and Ashland and places where I had like my paper route over there.
Well, dude, if you hit Mr. Ventry's, they would give you pizza or pop, sometimes both. Frankie's, yeah, you'd get donuts. Friggin' DiCamello's, they'd give you pizza or cookies or donuts. Like, I loved that. Like, because you'd be hitting all the houses, getting your standard candy, and if you were lucky, like the lunch size bag of chips or like a Huggy or something. Then like, I love the houses that gave out those fucking Huggy barrels, man. I used to get multiple ones of those. But yeah, like when I'd get down to Pierce, I'd hit up Mr. Ventry's and they'd be like, here you go. And like, they'd give you a slice of, cheese and pepperoni. So now you got like your dinner while you're out there trick or treating. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Didn't have to stop. Yeah. And like, I had those parents who, believed the stories about people putting like needles and razor blades in the candy. So anything that didn't have like a factory wrapper, they would just throw out. Like my dad would go through it and throw it out. So if anybody gave us like cookies, well, shit, we would just eat them while we were walking around,
Same, exactly. Because my parents were, and it was like when my mom would go with us, obviously I couldn't get away with that. But once it was just like me, my brother, and our friends, oh yeah. Yeah, we've freaking hitting up Ventry's and Frankie's and everywhere. It was great.
Oh yeah, yeah. We would go until we were exhausted. I mean, it was like you could not give up until every porch light was off.
Well, not only that, but like you eventually would fill that pillowcase. Like it would be full, and you'd have to bring that shit home and empty it out and go back out. Like that's what blows my mind because like trick or treating with Caleb. We'll make the rounds around our neighborhood, but again, there's all the time limits on how, like, when you can start, when you have to end it by. So, like, you only have so much time to be out there because I think it starts at 4 and as over by 8. And like a lot of people, right? A lot of people aren't home by 4, so like we don't even go out until like 5:30 because it's like, well, you got to give people time to get home, have a bite to eat, whatever, get ready. So it's like we'll start maybe around like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we'll be home before 8 because like he'll fill his bag and just be like, I'm good. And I'm like, really? There's still time. Let's go. Come on.
Right? Yeah. And like, I had those parents Tegan is like that. Tegan will go for a while, and of course, they're a teenager now. But even when they were younger, they would go for a while, and then they would get tired. But Griffin is nonstop. He will hit every single house. He doesn't care. He doesn't even care if the porch lights are on. Like he's going to every single house. He has not given up. But yeah, even though our neighborhood is awesome for Halloween, technically it's supposed to be between 5 and 8. So it's a little bit. People don't really start coming around until around 6. You get the really little kids, like the toddlers, whose parents will bring them around at 5 o'clock because they got to get home and do whatever they're going to do as adults before the kids got to go to bed really early. But
Right.
you can kind of see the age groups as like the sun starts to go down. We get the older kids. So yeah, between 7 and 8, it's an absolute madhouse. It's crazy, but then it'll peter off really fast. And I remember last year it was only 9 p.m. and we were walking around like trying to find another house to go to. Like we had already filled up a bag, went home, dropped it off because it was like an absolute blitz. And then it was like it just fucking dies. I'm like, I don't understand it. But I have a side rant about Texas in general being different than New York when it comes to like how late things are open. It drives me crazy how early stuff closes here. Like the fucking Costco closes at like 6 p.m. and like all the stores close at like 7 or 8. I went out last night with Tegan because we had to run to the pet store to get a rat to feed their snake that had just molted and was like ready to eat. Hadn't eaten for a while because when they're in molting they won't eat. So it was like, cool, let's go get a rat real quick. And we go to the pet store. We got there like right before they were closing, and I looked at my watch and I'm like, it's only like 7:45. Like you close at 8 o'clock. And then we left. We went to the Home Depot. And it was open a little bit later. That's where I saw the headless horseman, and I grabbed some spray paint for Griffin. And then we were walking around the plaza back to my truck, and all the lights started going off. Like the half price books lights go off, the Party City lights go off, and I'm like, it's only like 8:30. Like, why is everything closing? I don't understand it.
And the thing that sucks is like around here, because of COVID, like when COVID happened, all of the 24-hour stuff stopped being 24 hours. And a lot of the like open until 2 or 3 in the morning places stopped doing that. So now like even like fast food places are closed by midnight. It's like, what the fuck? Like the other night, I'm trying to remember where was it the night yeah, it was the night I went to see Terrifier 3 because I went and hung out with a friend afterward. And then like I'm driving home, like, man, I don't really feel like cooking when I get home. It's like, hey, I'll grab some Mighty Taco. They were already closed. I'm like, but it's only 1. Like what happened? They used to open till 3. What the hell?
Yeah. In the town where I live, there's only 2 businesses that are open 24 hours, or really only a few that are open after 9. But there's the Walmart, which is only open 24 hours for part of the year, and then Whataburger, which is the only place you can eat after midnight in town, unless you want to go home. And people love Whataburger in Texas. Like people brag about how great it is, but I think it's gross.
I've always been curious about it because I see that exact conversation online all the time where people are like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And then other people, like people that are from Texas, are like, nah. It's like, it's so weird. Like they talk about it on Good Mythical Morning all the time, like Whataburger.
Yeah.
Gotta be
It's like, I think people like it because they have good ideas. They serve stuff with like jalapenos and like grilled cheese, and they have spicy ketchup, and they have like cool milkshake flavors. Like it's like they have good ideas, but the actual like meat patties are just so boring. Like there's not, I don't understand. Without the toppings, this is gross. Like if you're a person that can't have cheese and doesn't like spicy things, then there's nothing good for you to eat at Whataburger.
That sucks.
Anyway. Oh man. But speaking of childhood, if you don't mind, Mike, I would like to tell a story.
Yeah, go for it.
It's kind of long. There's 2 parts, but I think it's really interesting, and I think it'll be a fun add-on to this episode. It is a true crime story that is, we'll say, adjacent to my childhood. And I don't have all the details. I'm not an expert, so if I get some of these things wrong, please feel free to go look them up online. You can Google the names that I'm going to say and get all the creepy details. But when I was a kid, I was born in Victoria, Texas, so I am a native Texan, but I only lived here until I was 5. And I've mentioned some of these details before in previous episodes, but in 1985, when I was 5 years old, I want to tell a little side story. My dad converted a school bus into a moving van because it was cheaper for him to buy a bus and drive us across the country with all of our stuff than like get like a U-Haul or something, because we moved from Texas to Massachusetts. It's like a long drive with like two little kids. You know, my brother was 7 and I was 5. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that I knew that we were moving, because I'm sure that I would have had to pack up all my stuff. But you know, when you're 5, you don't really understand everything. And I don't have a great temporal memory, but I have a very clear memory of playing near the tree in front of my house when I was 5 with the neighbor kid, and I had a Lino action figure, brand new, 1985, right? I looked
Hmm.
up before we started recording to make sure I was remembering this right. Brand new Thundercats toys, and my friend was actually playing with the Lino, and I had something else. And I remember my mom calling me over to come get on the bus, and I remember saying something like, "Oh, I'll be right back." And I went over, got on the bus like we were going to go somewhere, and it wasn't until we got out on the highway that I was like, "Wait, we're not going back?" Like the the kids got my Lino.
Oh, that sucks.
And we like never went back, and I was just like, I mean, we're just going to drive away forever and never go back, like, you know.
Oh, that is
Oh
the
man.
worst.
And I had like Thundercats toys after that, but I never replaced that Lino. Anyway, sad tears. Anyway, so we drove that school bus all the way to Massachusetts to be closer to where my mom's family lived. She grew up in towns around like Boston and in New Hampshire. So we ended up moving to this town called Pepperell, which is in sort of central Massachusetts, up close to the New Hampshire border. So we lived there basically from like 85, 86 to like 1988. I started kindergarten in Texas, and I finished kindergarten in Pepperell, and I went there for first and second grade. So that's like setting the scene. Well, in 1986, so like the year we got there or the year after, there was this kid who lived in Townsend. Townsend was the town right next to Pepperell. It was a bigger town where we would go shopping there sometimes. And there was this kid named Daniel LaPlante, who we found out later in the news that he was a creepy dude. And what was so creepy is that he went on a date with this girl named Tina, who thought he was a complete weirdo. He was like filthy, he was gross, he acted really strangely. She was totally creeped out by him. And then over the next couple of months, she had become convinced that either her house was haunted or that like somebody had been like breaking in and like spying on them and stealing from them. And she had been trying to convince her dad, who it took a while to convince him. But eventually the family realized that somebody was in their house or had been in their house. And
Oh no.
it turns out that this kid Daniel had become obsessed with Tina after this like one date they went on, and he followed her home, broke into her house, and there was like a crawl space like behind a wall, like literally like tiny, like 6 or 8 inches wide. He squeezed into it and then started like cutting holes and literally made like tunnels in the walls, like dude from People Under the Stairs.
That is
And
terrifying.
right? And he was living in this girl's house for months until one day they noticed that somebody had used the toilet and like not flushed, and it was like none of the people who lived there. They were like, what is going on? Who, like, literally this just happened. Somebody just used the toilet while we were here. And then the dad walked into another room to see like who's in our house, and there was this teenager, I think he was 16, who had like weird face makeup, and his hair was all spiked up and greasy, and he was wearing like all kinds of mismatched clothes like a costume, and he had a hatchet and a wrench, and he tried to attack this guy, and he held this girl Tina and her whole family like hostage in their house for hours, just ranting and raving like a maniac, until Tina broke through a window and ran for help.
What the fuck? That's
Right?
terrifying.
Totally fucked up. And then apparently when the police came, they couldn't find him because he had like gone back into hiding in the walls. And it wasn't until the family went back to the house that they found him, and he like tried to come out and like get them again. And you know, they were able to call the police. So the kid's like, he's a teenager, so he doesn't go to jail right away. He goes to juvie. His mom bails him out, and while he's on bail waiting trial, he's turned 17, and he goes to the house of a teacher in Townsend where he lived. And by the way, let me back up and say, remember I lived in Pepperell, the town right next door? Well, this
Uh-huh.
girl, Tina, her house was in Pepperell. It was in the town where I lived. It was about 5 or 6 miles from my house on the other side of town. But like, that's how close it was. So he goes to this
Holy
teacher's
crap.
house in Townsend and he murders her and both of her children and then like flees from the cops. He takes some guy hostage and is like trying to like hide in his like junkyard or whatever. And eventually the police did catch him and he did end up getting convicted for the murder of this poor woman and her little kids. They were like 5 and like 7 years old. And that motherfucker is still in prison to this day. He got 3 life sentences, no parole. He's going to die in prison.
Good. Fucking
So
crazy motherfucker.
crazy. But the story doesn't end there. So I remember this happening. Now, granted, I was like 6 or 7 years old, but I remember people at school were talking about it. It was on the news. It was in the newspaper. It was not a secret. Growing up, I didn't remember the kid's name. And my memory, I kept thinking his name was like Robert Plant, like the dude from Led Zeppelin. Obviously, I was remembering it wrong. And I used to tell people, oh, it was creepy. There was this like killer in the town where I lived. And I eventually kind of forgot about it until recently. I saw a TikTok video that was like a true crime. And I'm like, that's the kid. Oh my God, I remember. I remember everything this guy is saying. I mean, again, from like the news and stuff. So after I finished the second grade, we moved to Greenfield, Massachusetts. So we were in Pepperell for about 3 years. We moved to Greenfield, which is like an hour and a half drive, like to the west, more inland. Fun fact: it is the hometown of Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller.
Oh, nice.
So we lived in Greenfield. It was like this cute little town, like Main Street America, looked like the fucking town from Back to the Future, like Hill Valley, and cute little town. We were there for less than a year. And I never quite got the story from my mom as to why we moved so quickly. But after we moved in 1988, while I was in the third grade, I didn't even finish the third grade in living in Greenfield. That's how short we lived there. But there was this kid who worked at the local grocery store. It was one grocery store in town called the Stop and Shop. And it was where my parents used to shop. I remember going there all the time. It was like, the tops of the HEB. And they rented like VHS tapes. And the kid who worked there who rented the tapes was this guy named Mark Branch. He was like 18. I think he turned 19. And he was obsessed with horror movies. That's all he ever watched. He would play them at the store when he was working. He was constantly taking them out. This is the kind of kid that is the worst example of a horror fan because he takes it way too far. He creeped out all of his coworkers. He was totally obsessed with Jason Voorhees to the point where he had a shitload of merchandise, like multiple masks, full-on costumes, even like real weapons that Jason had used in movies to kill people. He didn't have replicas. He had like real ones, like real machetes and stuff.
Oh, fuck that.
But people didn't know about that till later. He was just this creepy dude that worked at the grocery store. Well, there was this woman named Sharon Gregory. And by the way, I do want to give names, to the victims here and not just these killers because, they don't just get all the spotlight. But yeah, Priscilla Gustafson was the poor teacher, the woman that Daniel LaPlante murdered. And so there was this woman named Sharon Gregory who was a psych major at the local community college there in Greenfield. She knew Mark. She was totally creeped out by Mark, but she was, as a psych major, like trying to help him, trying to get to know him. And the story is unclear, but somehow there was a psychological profile done on Mark Branch. Some stories say that she wrote it because, again, she was a psychology major at college. And some people say that Mark had gotten it done, like his mom or whoever made him do it, like see a psychiatrist, and that he just showed it to Sharon. But somehow Sharon had a psychological profile of him. She was planning on turning it in to her college as like an assignment. We know that because her twin sister Cheryl, told the story later, and Mark apparently found out that she was going to turn this profile into her class for like a project, and wanted nothing to do with that. So he found out one day that she was home alone, and he went to her apartment that she shared with her sister, but her sister wasn't there, and he dressed up entirely like Jason Voorhees, mask, like onesie suit, big boots, the whole deal, and he went to her house, and unfortunately her sister found her the next day stabbed 24 times.
Jesus Christ.
In the bathtub. They said it was like stabbed so many times they could barely recognize her, like horrifically mutilated. This motherfucker drove off in his own car. They found his car in the woods, not that far away, full of blood. So they immediately knew who it was. Plus, he's the creepy dude that was hanging out with this girl. That he had friends and roommates that everyone knew the story, or everyone knew who he was, and that Sharon was creeped out by him, but doing a profile. So again, I remembered this because just like with LaPlante, this was all over the news. Everybody at school was talking about it. People would claim to see Mark Branch in town all the time, like every day. There was reported sightings to the police. So this happened on October 24th, 1988. Halloween 4 just came out 3 days prior. The movie theater stopped showing it because they didn't want to show any horror movies because the whole town was freaked out. They ended up canceling Halloween that year, or to the point where they only allowed trick-or-treating before dark. After dark, no one was allowed on the streets. It was like a curfew. And again, I remember this because I'm like, man, Halloween was fucked up that year because we had to do it during the day, and we lived down a country road. So my dad just drove us from like house to house until we got bored, And it was like, man, we couldn't even like go out at night. Like my Dracula costume doesn't look good in like broad daylight,
right?
But yeah, so it was like weeks until eventually this hunter in the woods, not that far from where I lived, finds Mark Branch hanging from a noose in a tree, still fully dressed as Jason Voorhees, mask and all, like dead in a tree. Apparently a suicide, but everybody I knew at the time was convinced that it was vigilante justice. And even some of the stories I read online today to like get the details mentioned that people to this day still think that it was like hunters who found him in the woods and strung him up and then just claimed they found him that way. And which is exactly the story that I remember hearing when I was a kid.
Well, I mean, when there's a known killer, vigilante justice does tend to happen.
Yeah. So the next year, we weren't even in Greenfield a whole year. My parents moved us out of Massachusetts to Niagara Falls, New York, to be closer to my dad's family instead of my mom's family. And I finished the 3rd grade in Niagara Falls. And then, even though I was already 9 at that point, I went through middle school and high school. And I always think of Niagara Falls as like my hometown. But prior to that, I lived in 2 towns in Massachusetts where there were killers on the loose.
That is fucking crazy, dude. Holy crap. Like, and it's funny because this is also a Halloween pastime for me, is me and my brother used to sit up late at night and tell each other spooky stories before bed. Like, we just make them up. So we'd sit there and make up spooky stories. So this is very reminiscent of that. Like, I was just listening to this story like, ooh, what's going to happen next? Because I didn't know anything about this.
Nice. Yeah. I was trying to get all the details right so I could like tell it in a spooky way.
I'm sitting here literally feeling like I'm listening to a creepy bedtime story. That was awesome, dude.
Nice. So, I mean, I know I make light of it, but yeah, it's definitely terrible for, the victims and their families. And like I said, I wanted to, name the names of those people to remember them and not these assholes who took things too far. But Anyway, it's still an interesting story, and people are really into true crime. So there's my true crime adjacent story.
I had no clue we were going to bust out some true crime on this episode. That was a cool story. Like, I'm not trying to say it's cool because people died. It was an interesting story. But I had no idea you had that connection to those.
Again, I don't like to glorify the killers, but people are into true crime. So if you want to look up Daniel LaPlante and Mark Branch, you Google them. There's lots of information to be found online. And again, hopefully I got the details right. And yeah, the video, go back and watch it. I sent you that video about Daniel LaPlante on TikTok. It's just like part of the story. But I saw that, and I was already in bed laying at night, and I came across it in my feed. I was so spooked out. I got that feeling where like my stomach sank, and like I got the like goosebumps and chills, and I'm like, oh my God, I remember this. Holy shit.
Yep. That I've definitely had that feeling before. Just like something from the past comes back and freaks you out a little.
Yeah. If you look up Mark Branch, they call him the Friday the 13th killer, or the Jason copycat killer.
What's funny is not to derail us for a moment, but I'm currently watching Halloween Resurrection for the Boogeyman's Closet. And I started it last night and just kind of watched the first like half hour. And I got to say, like, there's this, first of all, I'm not going to ruin it here, but good God, what the fuck were they thinking with that movie? But it opens with a psych hospital, and there is a patient, an inmate, who is obsessed with serial killers. and he's just like giving the backstory of like, you know, John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy. And then of course in this universe, because Michael Myers is a serial killer, he's like rattling off, you know, Michael Myers' greatest hits basically. And that's what I was thinking of when you were telling me that story, like of someone that's obsessed. I was like, oh God, it's fucking creepy when people are obsessed to that level.
Yeah, it's very creepy. And a detail that I left out in the momentum of telling that story is while there was the manhunt going on for Mark Branch, because it was like a couple of weeks until they found him hung in the tree.
Mhm.
They found some creepy shit. First of all, they found his hoard of Jason stuff at his house, which is how they knew he had all that stuff. Like there's a picture of it in one of the newspaper articles that I found. Someone took a picture of his Jason collection, and like it's both impressive and creepy to know that he was actually using that to like hurt people.
Right.
And but also there was, I kid you not, I'm not making this up, an abandoned slaughterhouse deep in the woods where like not that far from where they found him, and inside the slaughterhouse somebody had painted like graffitied on the wall a drawing of Jason chasing a woman up a flight of stairs.
That's creepy as crap, man. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's pretty screwed up. So anyway.
Wow. One thing I want to talk about is going back to the trick-or-treating thing. When I was a kid, you know, my like I said, the neighborhood in Niagara Falls was crazy. Like they allowed you to trick or treat pretty much all night. But there was this one house on Linwood, and every year this guy went all out for Halloween. And it was like the house everyone was afraid of because he had all these mannequins and like creepy decorations in his yard, and you never knew where he was. He was always hiding somewhere in the display.
Mhm.
So like everyone would be like, there'd be this massive pile of kids just like outside of his fence looking in like, I think that's him. No, that's him. No, he's over there. And like you'd get the one kid that would eventually just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna go and get some candy. But if you went and you know you got the jump scare, you know, you go, you pay for it, but the jump scare, he gave either full size candy bars, the bags of chips, the Huggies. Like he always had good stuff. So it was like
Nice.
you knew you were gonna get scared, but it was gonna be worth it. Now the one year that he got me, he had this whole thing, and I don't even know how long this fucking took him to set this up, but he had an entire upside down scene on his porch. So he had the table and chairs like attached upside down to his like the porch roof.
Oh,
Then
nice.
he had like mannequins standing like upside down on the porch roof. There was a sleeping bag with what appeared to be a mannequin on the porch roof right above the door. So like you walk in and you see what you think is just a, you know, mannequin body in a sleeping bag fucking belted to the roof. You ring the doorbell and he was in the fucking sleeping bag and would grab your head.
Nice.
You know, everybody was standing outside. My brother, his friends, like we were all like a bunch of cluster kids. We're all standing out there and they're all daring each other. Like, you go, no, you go. We're all trying to figure out who's there. And I'm like, you know, I'm just at that age where I was like trying to prove I wasn't scared of scary stuff. I think I was like about 10. And I'm like, I'll do it. And I go walking up there and I ring the doorbell and I'm standing there all proud of myself. And something grabs the top of my head and I fucking collapse. I just fell to the ground like I had no bones. It was like just terrified, turned into a blubbering mess. And his wife comes to the door. He's trying to apologize. He's like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you that bad. She ends up giving me 2 bags of chips, so it was worth it. I got 2 bags. But everyone came running up after that, and of course everyone's teasing me the rest of the night. Oh, you scared the shit out of you. You crapped yourself. Like, just fucking with me, you know. But I will never forget that house. And it was sad because my last Halloween in that area of Niagara Falls, because we moved when I was 11, my last Halloween there, I think he had like a Halloween party or something going on that year. So he actually wasn't hiding in the yard. So everyone was like clustered outside, all scared. We go through like the creepy mannequins and then we get up to the door and knock, and he just answered the door and gave out candy bars. And it was like, oh. So,
Oh
but
man.
every previous year he would jump out and scare the shit out of us. There was also a house, and I forget what road it was on, but it was in downtown Niagara Falls. Every year they did this whole like setup. It was like, you know how there was the Festival of Lights in Niagara Falls, so you would just go and enjoy the lights.
Yeah.
It was like that for Halloween. They just had animatronics everywhere and spotlights and like things like they had like spiders on fishing lines that like someone in the house would like lower down on people on the sidewalk from the trees. Like it was so damn fun. But we would trick or treat and then we'd go and like just watch. And like there would just be a crowd of people like standing
Hmm.
around watching. And like, the husband and wife that lived there, sometimes they were dressed up like Dr. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. Sometimes it was, Frankenstein and the bride. Sometimes it was, Dracula and one of the brides of Dracula. Like they always had some kind of thing and they'd walk up, they'd be like, good evening, and like talk to the people outside. They sometimes had cider that they would give out. It was so much fun. And like that's the kind of shit you don't really see that much of anymore. But man, in the 80s, it was everywhere. It was like Halloween was an event not just to kids. It was an event to everybody. And it wasn't like when we were becoming adults where like Halloween was go to a party, dressed up, get shit faced, have a good time. It was like the adults couldn't wait to get home to like put on a show in their yard.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it was really fucking fun. So that's a huge part of my Halloween memories is trick or treating in that neighborhood. But another thing, and I'm sure you have some stories with this, but haunted houses.
Oh
Haunted
yeah.
houses are one of my all-time favorite parts about Halloween. And still to this day, like I try to go every year. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a drought because of COVID. Like I went in 2019, and then of course a lot of them weren't open in 2020. And then I didn't really trust it. By 2021, I was like, I don't really want to go and be with all those people in tight spaces. So last year was the first time I went for a couple years, and I had an absolute blast. And the main reason I went is because my buddy and partner in crime, Tara, she was one of the actors in Seven Gates. So I was like, I
Oh,
gotta go see
nice.
her. I gotta go at night. She's working. But there was when we were kids. You remember St. Paul's Church?
Yeah. Hmm.
They did St. Paul's Dungeon every year,
Oh,
and
nice.
it was the coolest haunted house. Like, don't get me wrong, haunted catacombs, House of Horrors, fantastic haunted houses. And I'm sure these are much scarier through the primrose glasses that I'm looking at them through. Um, but man, the St. Paul's Dungeon was terrifying because they did something that I don't see very often anymore. They would have a guide. So like he would
Hmm.
get a group together and then he would walk you down into the basement and he would be always telling you a story about like some kind of like serial killer or demonic presence. There would always be some kind of tale that led into the haunted house. And then you go in and they would have little vignettes. So like there was one I remember when Critters was really popular where they were clearly like handmade critter puppets. They were awful looking. But as a kid, it was like, holy shit, the critters, because they were like jumping out of the walls and like biting on people. This is also back in the 80s when you could still touch people in haunted houses, so people would grab
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Um, but there was one I'll never forget. It was the only time like I was terrified of Jason as a little kid. They had this one vignette where it was two campers sitting around a fake campfire talking about the legend of Jason Voorhees, and they're wearing like Camp Crystal Lake t-shirts, and like you hear the in the background,
Nice.
and like they're talking like, did you hear that? And us as the crowd watching, we see someone like behind the fake trees and the vignette like moving, and it's like, what is that? Then the lights go out and they come back on and Jason is standing over both of them and they're dead with blood on them. And then he walks out of the set at us and we're supposed to run. I froze and he just chopped the machete above my head against the wall and I just started screaming. I was like, ah! Just scared the shit out of me. Oh my god. But there were so many scenes like that in St. Paul's. Like there was one they always had like a big finale. And usually either during the finale or leading up to the finale, our guide would get killed, like quote unquote. So like something
Hmm.
would like take the guide and then you'd have to find your way through the last bit of it. But I remember one year in particular, they had Frankenstein's lab. So the big finale was we walked in and there was like strobe lights and like you'd see these electrodes, and then there was this guy dressed up like a mad scientist. He was like, "Oh, good evening," like doing like the fake mad scientist talking
Nice.
about his creature about to arise, and he flips this switch and strobe lights turn on, and this fucking Frankenstein sits up from the table, and then it grabs the doctor and strangles him, and then starts going coming at us, and everyone just fucking scatters like trying to get out. but it was so much fun. Like I look back so fondly on St. Paul's Dungeon. And this is after years of going to other haunted houses. That one just, it sticks out as like such a pivotal moment for me as a kid. And some of the haunted houses as adults, like there's plenty of stories. I could probably fill a whole episode telling haunted house stories from an adult. But there was one in particular where, oh my God, it was the haunted catacombs. Now, I don't know if you ever went to the haunted catacombs.
Just once.
So you remember how like they would just kind of let you in and you'd have to find your way out.
Yep.
You know, like you could be in there for like an hour if you got lost, because there was a lot of mazes. Well, it was me, Steve, Kara, one of Kara's friends. I can't remember who else was with us, but there was like a good group. We got split up real quick. Like it was me and Steve got broken off from the rest of the group. So we're walking around trying to find our way through this door maze. And this lady just comes out of nowhere and grabs onto me going, oh my God, don't leave me. I lost my friends. I'm so damn scared. So she's like holding on to me for safety. I'm like, okay. And I'm just trying to like lead to find our way out. So we're walking through this house. She's jumping at everything, which was making it 10 times more fun because she was like really scared by all this. So her fear was kind of rubbing off on me. Like when she would jump, I'd be like, oh, what the fuck was that? Like, well, we get to this area where there were these 2 tunnels that you could climb through, and they looked gross. They looked like sewer tunnels, and there was all these like barrels around. And of course, I'm immediately thinking, trioxin. But
yeah, right.
We get to the tunnel, and then this animatronic like skeletal zombie pops up out of one of the barrels, like, it does like the hissing sound of the animatronic, like the psst as the pistons fire. She jumps in that tunnel. And she was a larger woman. I'm not, body shaming or anything, but she jumps in that tunnel and I'm right behind her. So all I can see is her ass shaking back and forth like, she like, and then she just falls out of the other end. So it was like, just so I'm pissing myself trying to catch up. But that was the end. And as soon as we got out, she hugs me. She's like, oh my God, thank you for not leaving me. She's like, I thought I was going to die. She goes, now I got to go find my bastard friends. And she walked away. It was one of my favorite times in a haunted house. She cracked me up. But it was like, I love it when you're with somebody that gets like that into it, because it's like, it makes it 10 times more fun,
Yeah, absolutely.
There was also, and I know, like I said, I could tell many of these, but I'll wrap it up with this one. There was also one when I was a teenager, and I was like at that point where like, I think every horror fan goes through this, where it's like, I'm not scared. Nothing scares me.
Yep.
I was at that age, and I was, this was during like the youth group days. So me and my youth group went to, it was a haunted hayride, and it was kind of lame. Like we're on the back of like, it was like a tractor pulling like a little hay loft or hay, container. There's like 5 of us in sitting on the hay. So we're trucking along, and there's like little things, like there was some witches out in the corn and like, some spooky ghosts hanging in the trees, like all lame shit, right? And as we're riding along, the guy is telling us this story about a killer in the area and how he's been, rumor is he's been hiding out here in the cornfield. So, we gotta be careful. And he pulls up toward this little shack, and then he like turns off the, tractor, but acts like it's stalled. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, it's stalled out. He's like, oh, I got to fix this. He's like, good thing we're right here by this here shack. I'm going to go get some tools. So he goes off. We're all sitting there like, this is so freaking lame. That he comes running out all scared. And this guy in a hockey mask with a chainsaw comes walking out. And we're just like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then he revs the saw. Now, we've talked about this before, how chainsaws freak me the fuck out. So as soon as it revs, I'm like, I'm still trying to be like it's not scary, but I'm a little creeped. Like, it scared me. So the guy jumps up on the track. He's like, hold on, folks. He's like, I forget what the name of the killer was, but he's like, it's so-and-so the killer. And he's trying to get the tractor started. He's like, pulls out a fake gun, clearly a fake gun. It was like a cap gun. And he fires a couple of rounds, and the guy falls over. And then he gets the tractor. He's like trying to get it turned on. And we're all like, okay, this is dumb. Then the guy jumps up, like literally just stands up, revs the saw, and runs at us.
Nice.
I damn near jumped out and ran away. Like, I was so scared. And it starts trucking along, and he's like climbing up on the back of the little container there, just like revving the saw at us. Everyone's screaming. I'm just frozen, staring straight forward. Because now the girl I liked at the time was with us, and I'm trying not to be scared, but I'm just frozen. Like, what do I do? She's screaming bloody murder, and I'm just like not moving a muscle. But inside, I was full on panicking. Like, oh my God. And I've been on several haunted hayrides since, and none of them hit that hard. Like that one, it was so lame, but that little finale scared the shit out of me. So good times.
Yeah, dude, I know exactly how you feel because I was at a haunted hayride and almost the exact same thing happened to me. But it's a little bit different. It's funny because you started talking about haunted houses, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I got two stories I want to mention just real quick. Like they're short, and then you actually touched on both of them. um, so yeah, but I wasn't like a disaffected teenager. I was like 10 or 11, and yeah, same thing. And this it's like a memory unlocked. I had forgotten all about going to haunted hayrides as a kid. My parents took us a couple of years in a row, and I don't even remember where they were. Somewhere in like Ransomville, like farm country somewhere. And I remember standing in line for hours, like drinking hot cocoa and cider, and just kind of enjoying the weather, but also like, man, we wait out here for so long, and then you get on the back of this. It's like a trailer with like hay bales to sit on, and people would be sitting on the edge of it with your feet hanging off. And this one particular time, that was me. I was sitting on the edge with my feet hanging off next to my mom, and the tractor's pulling us through the woods, and there's like witches and ghosts and shit hung in the trees, and they're playing creepy music, and there's different scenes like you explained. Mm-hmm. And it was a similar thing. This must have been a couple years before, like before they had like their act down, because it had to be the same place. What happened with us, and again, I'm like 10 or 11. I've been into Jason movies since I was like 8. I lived in Pepperell at the time when I saw Friday the 13th Part 6 for the first time. So it's still, I'm still like an impressionable kid. And what happens is that the tractor, like, quote unquote, breaks down. Right? The guy's like, oh, I don't know what happened. Hang on a second, everyone. I'll get it going again. And he doesn't get off. He's just like fiddling with something, And then like no one announces anything. It's just somebody's like, oh my God. And you look, and here comes Jason Voorhees walking out of the woods, like that fast Jason walk. He just comes straight out of the woods, like on like a beeline right at the trailer. And the guy on the tractor's like, oh no, hang on. And he's like, I'll get it going. And he's like, pretending that he's trying to get the tractor going. And even at 10 years old, I'm sitting there like, oh, this is creepy. But like, we're going to drive away before he gets here, obviously. But right. No, fucking no. Jason comes all the way up to the trailer. He pulls that ripcord on his chainsaw, revs it up, it starts smoking. Everyone starts screaming. He gets all the way up to the trailer and fucking starts scratching the chainsaw along the edge, like where people have their legs hanging off. Now, of course, we realized later there was no chain on it, like so it wasn't actually dangerous. But he's like literally hitting the trailer like a foot from my legs, and like we were pissing ourselves, screaming, like I'm trying to pull my legs up and hide, like I'm 10 years old, fucking freaked the fuck out. Then the tractor starts moving, and you see him just waving the chainsaw over his head like Leatherface, like he can't chase us for some reason, and everybody was just having like a fucking heart attack.
That had to be the same place, because like when I went, I was probably about 15, 16. So like this was like 95, 96 when I went. So if you went when you were younger, then yeah, they probably were doing this whole shtick for a couple years.
Yeah, like they had a whole like scene perfected by the time you went, because for those who don't know, like we're the same age, right? So
yeah, exactly.
We would have been the same age at those times. But and then you mentioned the haunted house before, and I wasn't going to say anything, but then you mentioned like how there were guides, and I'm like, well, that's funny because I was a scare actor in a haunted house three times, and it was also for a church, not a Catholic church like St. Paul's. Like this was one of those like non-denominational churches that I belonged to in Niagara Falls, and they would do a little haunted house, and it was cool because the first year was just at the church, but then they had to move to this. Do you remember the Niagara? I think it was called Niagara Glass Factory that used to be on Pine Avenue.
Yeah.
Just a few blocks down from like where that Tim Hortons is now. Anyway.
Yep. 100%.
That glass factory went out of business, and the church got that building, and it was just a big wide open space, like a warehouse with like offices in the front. So what they did is they got these giant sheets of like black tarp, like huge, that the ceilings were like 25-30 feet high, and they basically made walls with these like black sheets and made like little rooms, and it was creepy as shit because the walls would wave, which
Oh, fuck that.
in the darkness is creepy as fuck. But and one year I was just like a creepy guy. I was in a room like full of bugs, and I was being like eaten alive. I was like screaming. But what was really fun was when I got to be the guide. I did it 2 years in a row, and what was really fun is that the guy who ran the youth group at the church, his day job was that he was a firefighter instructor. Like, he taught people how to become firefighters, and so he had access to stuff. And for whatever reason, I don't know if he got permission or whatever, but he was able to get ballistics gel and jelly from his job. And so what I did as the guide was, we would bring people into the front in this like little office area, and then they would open up the door into the back with like the big walls like hanging from the ceiling, and it was pitch fucking black because it was a factory with black tarps hung everywhere. Like, there was no light. So they would open up this like sliding door, and I'd be standing in the dark with a candelabra, just lit candles. And I was just like a butler or whatever. I don't remember my exact script, but it was something like, come into the house of horror, whatever, something like
Right.
that. And I would like shamble kind of slowly to let the whole group get in. They would slam the sliding doors shut with a big thud. We'd all be in pitch fucking darkness with just me and the candles as the only light. And I'd be like, never fear, like, you're safe with me or whatever. And then I would accidentally, quote unquote, accidentally bump into the wall because it's pitch fucking dark. And I would knock the candles onto myself. Oh, and by the way, I had like fake blood on my costume, like to look scary, but also to hide the fact that my right arm was completely coated in ballistics jelly from my shoulder to my hands. and I had like 4 gloves on and like layers of sleeves. And so right before everybody walked in, I would like dunk my arm in the bucket of jelly. People would come in, I'd bump into the wall, spill the candles on myself, and my fucking arm would light up, just engulfed in flames.
My God.
Which, by the way, is super fucking freaky to look at your own hand just completely on fire. And so I would just start screaming, and I would run away down the hallway and then leave the people in the pitch fucking dark room.
Dude, that's amazing.
It was so fun. And I would I would run down and I would like walk around the back through the offices and then like come back around and like reload for the next group. Man, I must have did that like 40 times that night. It was so fun.
Oh, that is so cool. And see, it's like, I feel like that's the type of stuff that, you could get away with in the 80s and 90s that now you could never get away with. And it's like, man, like, there was so much cool stuff that could happen back then. Like, and I like I said, I could tell 1,000 haunted house stories, but just a real quick wrap up. This wasn't even on Halloween, but I'm sure you remember in Canada the nightmares.
Oh yeah,
the year-round haunted house, and it's one of those pitch black haunted houses with the little pin lights that you follow, and they have certain rooms. Like, there's one room that the door is closed and everything rattles, and you hear people screaming around you, and then the door opens and they let you out, that kind of thing. So me and several of my friends, we would go regularly. We would just go like every weekend. We'd go up to Canada because what else are we going to do? We were like 16, 17, 18, just like, fuck it, let's go to Canada. And we just drive around.
Yeah, it'd be bored.
Yeah, we'd go to Clifton Hill, go to Dufferin Islands, whatever. Well, we kept going to nightmares, and 2 of my friends were daring me over and over, go through by yourself, go through by. And again, being that age where I'm like, I'm not scared of nothing. And the one girl I had a crush on, so I was trying to be, impressing. So I go up there and I'm like, 1, please. And the guy's like, he points at my 2 friends and he's like, you guys aren't going? And they're both like, no, we're gonna stay here. And he goes, hold on a sec. And he goes into the microphone. He goes, we got a loner. And I was like, what? What does that mean? And he's like, no, don't worry about it. He's like, it's $11. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go now. And I was like really freaked out. So I ended up looking like the world's biggest wuss because I was terrified. Because I'm like, I have seen far too many horror movies to trust that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when they call you out like that. They probably just did it on purpose to freak people out. But
oh yeah, absolutely. But I was, because like he spoke into a microphone, was like, we got a loner. Like it went over the overhead. I'm like, no, I don't know who's in there. Like,
Oh man. Okay, we got to wrap this one up, but this has really become a long episode. But I'm totally fine with it because this has been a lot of fun. But
oh, absolutely.
the last thing I'll say about haunted houses is I haven't really been to any lately. Over the last couple of years, Tegan and I have been to a few, and I really want to go this year. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, man, I gotta get to Costco and buy those tickets. But anyway, the last time that I went to one, it was like multiple like mazes in this one like big. It was like an abandoned like office park, and so it was like they had like the zombies in one spot and like monsters or whatever, and there was like a clown maze. And I
Hmm.
remember we were going through, and first of all, I'm not really scared by clowns, but this actually was the worst one because they had rigged it so that the floors were moving back and forth, like slanting in different directions. So we were constantly afraid of falling over while there's like weird clowns popping out of the walls and stuff. And it, it was super, it was like strobe lights and it was super creepy. And because we're like, when you're with a crowd of people and they get scared, they start to kind of rush. And there's always these moments where there's a little bit of a press of people, where
Yep.
like people behind you start pushing because they're like, get me the fuck out of here. Well, there was this guy behind me who kept like pushing closer and pushing like he was, and I was getting a little bit annoyed. Like, I know you're scared, dude, but like, Jesus, like this is getting to be a little bit much. And at a certain point, we had to stop because there was like a small doorway, and so Tegan and I were kind of waiting for the people to go through. And I finally decided to take a look behind me just out of curiosity. Who the fuck is behind me pushing? And it's like a fucking 6'5" Art the Clown looking motherfucker just staring at me. He'd been pushing me the whole time, waiting for me to notice him.
Oh my God, that would have scared the shit out of me.
Oh god. Oh
Oh
man, that
man.
was fun.
So yeah, haunted houses huge part of Halloween. Before we wrap this up, I think there's two things we need to discuss. One, childhood costumes. Like if rattle off as many as you can remember from like the time. Let's say from kindergarten up. Like what do you remember you dressed up as? We don't got to go
Oh
into
god.
tons of detail, but what are some of the things you dressed up as?
Yeah, so you know that I have a bad temporal memory, so I'm mixing everything up.
Mhm.
Hell, I forgot that there was like a killer in my town when I grew up. I definitely know that I was Dracula 3 years in a row, and that would have been a Pepperell, a Greenfield, the canceled one, and one in Niagara Falls. So yeah, those are the only ones I know of because I remember being in three different towns. I remember being a one of like the nameless random road warrior bad guys from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome because I
Oh,
was obsessed
nice.
with that movie. I remember being a ninja, and that would have been I was in no, not Greenfield. I forget. So yeah, I was probably still in Pepperell, so it would have been first or second grade. I'm trying to think what else. I tried very badly to be Gilman, the creature from the Black Lagoon one year, but we just could not do the makeup, and for whatever reason I didn't have a mask. I don't know if my mom like wouldn't buy it or we couldn't find one, but I remember it just being like the worst Gilman costume.
Right.
I remember having one of those costumes where you just drape the vinyl like smock on, and mine just said like GI Joe, and I had like a Duke mask. uh,
Nice.
I do remember same like a similar like Ben Cooper style Frankenstein at one point. There was a couple of years there when I was just obsessed with Frankenstein. I think I only dressed up as Frankenstein's monster that one year, but I was like pretty obsessed with him for a few years. But yeah, I'm starting to forget. Like as an adult, again, I would always do like bare minimum bullshit. So like I dressed up as like a baby because I bought the last costume they had available at Spirit Halloween on Halloween. Like I was a nun one year for almost the same reason. That when I did that haunted house where I dressed up as like a guy being attacked by like bugs, like swarmed by insects. I just wore that for Halloween that year, but I was like 17. So yeah, I'd
Nice.
have to stop and think about the childhood ones a little bit more. But yeah, those are the ones that I can remember right off the top of my head.
So for me, I'm not going to go pre-kindergarten, but from kindergarten to 8th grade, I remember pretty much everything that I dressed up as. In kindergarten, I was a ninja. I was obsessed with ninjas. It was the 80s,
Hmm.
1985. Come on. Storm Shadow, Chuck Norris, like Enter the Ninja, like Revenge
Oh
of the
hell
Ninja.
yeah.
There was so many freaking ninja movies. Ninja Turtles hadn't come out in cartoon form yet, but it was still in comic books. Like the pop culture zeitgeist of ninjas was everywhere. Um, so of course I was obsessed. Then in first grade, I was the Grim Reaper, and it was like I just had a black cloak and glow in the dark face makeup. So it was that like white face makeup that didn't really glow in the dark. It
Yeah.
barely glowed, but it was that, it was quote unquote glow in the dark.
Mhm.
Super simple costume. It was just a white face, black around the eyes, and then like the little lines over my mouth, like, oh, look, it's a skeleton. Black nose, that whole thing. And then second grade, I don't know how I convinced my mom to let me do this at a Catholic school, but I dressed up like Jason Voorhees. So
Nice.
I had the skull cap and I just had some of my hair sticking out, and I had the freaking hockey mask. I just had a flannel shirt because like I didn't have a jumpsuit when I was in
Yeah.
second grade. So I had like a flannel shirt and jeans, but then like a fake machete, and then like I had a pair of my dad's like work gloves, so they were way too big on me. But we had like red paint all over them, so it looked like I had bloody hands. And then third grade, I got to be Freddy Krueger.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and that my mom made a fake glove. Like she wouldn't buy me one of the plastic gloves. It was like, you got Freddy at home type of thing. She was like, we're not doing that. So, but she did make a really cool glove. It was all out of cardboard and tinfoil, but she made like the fake, knives and the like piece of metal that goes on the back part of your hand. Like, and she sewed it all onto a glove, and it was really cool. And then I just had she made a red and green sweatshirt. It wasn't quite a sweater, but a red and green sweatshirt. I had one of my uncle's like fedora hats and then face makeup. Looking back at
Nice.
photos that my mom has, I looked awful. Like I was a fat little weird Freddy Krueger. It just looked like I was a hobo that rolled in some trash. But in my head, I was Freddy.
Oh yeah.
Then in fourth grade, I was Beetlejuice, which did not work
That's
in
cool.
my favor because, again, homemade costume. I was a pudgy ass little kid. I looked like fucking Pugsley Adams more than Beetlejuice. uh, but hey, I was Beetlejuice, and people got the reference because it was timely, and it was right around when that movie had come out. Fifth grade. Now this is the one. This is the one I've been wanting to talk about. This was when I started like making my own characters. Keep in mind, I went to Catholic school. And we did the whole thing where you'd parade around, like after lunch, we'd all get dressed up in our costumes. We would do the whole thing where like everyone in the school would go down to the gymnasium and we'd see everybody's costumes. And then we'd do a parade, and we'd parade around the block. So,
Yep. I remember doing that.
yeah. And like sometimes like people would like, especially older folks that were retired, they'd be out already watching the parade. Sometimes they'd like give you candy as you passed by. So it was fun. It was a fun little thing you did. But I dressed up as this character I was just calling the Butcher. And it was mainly because there was a fake meat cleaver that I wanted to buy at Kmart. I thought it was a really cool weapon. And they're like, oh, I want this. And then I found one of those. Do you remember the holographic eye masks? Like that was a big thing in the 80s. In fact, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, you got the guy with the holographic eyeglasses. So it was a fake metal mask. It kind of looked like Dr. Doom if Dr. Doom's mouth was like jagged teeth.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it was like this plastic mask, but designed to look like a metal mask plated together, and it had hologram eyes. And I was obsessed. I'm like, I need this mask. So my mom was like, well, what are you going to dress up as? I'm like, I'm going to be the Butcher. He's a monster and kills people. It's like, so she's like, all right, let's go with it. So I had a black hoodie on, and I had this mask. It was just like, a face mask with a elastic strap on the back. And then she made a bloody apron for me. And so I had the bloody apron on, and then I had a backpack, which I don't know how I convinced her to do this, but she made fake arms and legs for me, like literally like plush arms and legs
Oh, nice.
that I had hanging out of the backpack, all covered in blood.
That's cool.
And then in the backpack, I had one of those portable cassette players, and I was playing the spooky sounds tape. So it was like the chains and the screaming and all that.
Nice.
So after lunch, everyone all gets dressed up, and everyone's like staring at me in the boys' bathroom as I'm getting dressed. It's like people are like, what the? It's like got like fucking Chewbacca and a ninja staring at me like, what the fuck's wrong with Alvarez? So I get all dressed up and I walk into class. The whole class stops and just looks at me. And I go to take my seat. We had the thing where we did the tables around the sides of the room so we could have like juice and cookies. And I went and took the seat, and it was next to this girl. I won't name her name because I still am friends with her to this day, and I don't want to embarrass her if she doesn't want the story being told. But she was dressed up like grapes. So she had the big purple balloons all on her. And she's sitting there, and I sat down next to her and just looked at her. And it was the funniest thing because like she just stared at me and just went, just started bawling. Like I scared her so bad. So then the teacher made me take off my costume.
What the fuck?
So I'm like the only one in my class sitting there like with regular like my uniform on, and everyone else is dressed up. Like, this is stupid.
Oh man, that sucks. Fuck.
So then 6th grade, I was Gambit from the X-Men, but
Oh,
again,
cool.
I was a fat Gambit. So that just looked funny as hell looking back at that. But I had, the trench coat. My mom made the weird like design on his chest that like whatever the fuck that thing is that he wears. And then like I had the fake like leg braces like that would go up over my knees. Again, they were all just made out of felt and cloth.
Yeah.
I had a bow staff, and then she made the weird head sock that he wears. And my sister went crazy with my hair. Like she just teased it up with as much hairspray as she possibly could. So I just had like this crazy hair coming out of the head sock. And again, it was cool because it was right around the time of the Jim Lee era X-Men, like the revamp. And so everybody was talking about X-Men. So all my friends were like, oh, it's fucking cool, even though I was weird fat Gambit. But then 7th grade, I did the make my own costume. I was an alien bounty hunter.
Nice,
and
nice.
The only reason I dressed up as this was because I wanted one of those weird Terminator hands you could get at KB.
Yeah.
So I had one of those. I had this creepy, like, alien mask with like fangs, and it was just a weird mask, and then the trench coat from the Gambit costume, and I had one of those fake pellet guns. You remember the shotguns you could buy at KB that would shoot the little yellow pellets? So I had one of those. I spray painted it silver and black, and then I was walking around with this like robot hand, monster mask, and a trench coat with a shotgun. And then finally 8th grade is when I dressed up like the Grim Reaper, which became my go-to costume for years. And it's like you were mentioning with your Dracula costume, how you constantly built it up, year after year after year.
Yep.
By the time I stopped wearing that thing, I had like the 2-layered mask where it was the screen mesh mask with the skeletal mask over top of it. So inevitably when someone would grab the skeleton mask, you'd be like, you're not so scary. There would be no face under it, and it freaked people out.
Nice.
I had the gloves where we sewed like the fake bones on the top, and then I had like they were kind of pointed, so it looked like I had like long taloned bony hands. Then I had the double cloak, so I had the cloak, and then I had a cape over top of it, and on the cape there was like spider webs, and like it was all dusty looking. It was a really fun costume. I did that for years. In fact, when I stopped trick or treating, I used to stand out on my parents' porch dressed up like that and give out candy.
Nice.
But yeah, we could go on for hours about the Halloween costumes. But the other thing I wanted to ask is, okay, give me a top 5 Halloween treats. Like what was it that when you were like, fuck yeah, that's my favorite? Like when you were out trick or treating, what were you looking for?
Oh man, as a kid, it would have all been chocolate. Now I tend to go for, like, I want the Skittles and the sour candies, the Sour Patch Kids, things like that, fruity gummy stuff. But as a kid, it was always the fun size bars or the full size bars like my grandfather would give out. But yeah, Snickers, Milky Way, Twix, peanut butter cups, all that stuff. Like, I don't think that there was anything special that I was like specifically like psyched about. My brother might listen to this and tell me I'm making shit up, but I feel like he was really into like Fun Dip, and that was like the thing he would get excited about.
I dug Fun Dip when I was a kid, and now I can't stand it because you have to like lick the stick and put it back in, and then I'm like, that's gross.
Yeah. You know what I'll do is I'll say it was those little mini boxes of Nerds, the mini ones.
Oh, I love those.
Because I would tear the top off and dump the whole box in at once.
I did the same thing. See, now for me, it was absolutely Snickers and Reese's peanut butter cups. Like those were like that was top tier. But the other things that I fucking went ape shit for anytime I got, and I would always try to trade for. You remember Sugar Babies and Sugar Daddies?
Oh God, see, I used to hate those. I would have traded with you.
Oh, I fucking loved them. I would go crazy for those things. Lemon Heads was another one I went ape shit for. Anytime I got a box of Lemon Heads, I was like super excited. And then, like, as I mentioned before, the potato chips and the Huggies. Anytime I got those, I was like, fuck yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I would trade away the Sugar Babies, Sugar Daddies, like Mike and Ike's. I wasn't into those. I don't remember there being fun size whatchamacallit, but when I was a kid, that was my favorite candy bar. So I would
Oh,
occasionally get like a full size one. I eat them now and I'm like, I don't understand what the big deal is. But like when I was a kid,
right.
I was obsessed. Whatchamacallits were like, that was my go to. And then when I went through my phase in elementary school where I would steal candy all the time from the Tops grocery store near my elementary school. I would steal like whole like big, the big packs that come with like 12 or 15 or whatever. Like I would
Yep.
steal the whole big pack and hide them at home, and then like every day I'd slip one in my backpack and I'd have a whatchamacallit at lunch.
God, I probably haven't had a whatchamacallit since I was in my 20s. I can't think of the last time I ate one. I know I was
Yeah.
an adult, but it was definitely before Caleb was around because I haven't had one in years.
Yeah, I haven't had one in years either, just because I remember not having one for a while, and then yeah, at some point I was like, oh yeah, whatchamacallit, I used to love those, and I bought one, and I'm just thinking like, what? This is gross. Like, why did I used to like this? It's so lame.
The candy I did that with, and we're going as recent as like a couple years ago. I think this was like it was pre-COVID, but like Caleb was, I want to say like 8 or 9, like he was a little older. Um, it was Charleston Chews. As
Oh yeah.
a kid, I fucking loved those things. And as an adult, I had one, and I'm like, my teeth hate this.
Yeah.
like, like it's getting stuck everywhere. I'm like, I'm not happy about any of this. But as a kid, man, anytime I got one of those, I loved it. Same thing with the sugar daddies. Like again, I'm sure I would hate that as an adult,
Yeah.
just because of the teeth feel. But as a
Yeah.
kid, oh hell yeah, I was all about it.
Yeah, my mom loved Charleston Chew. I think as a kid, I probably thought they were okay. I don't remember especially liking it, but I would give most of mine to my mom. That would be like her mom tax out of my
Yep.
Halloween bag would be the Charleston Chews and the Tootsie Rolls, which I was like, yeah, they're okay. Like I don't really have any special interest in Tootsie Rolls.
My mom, it was the peppermint patties. She loved those. And my dad would conveniently always find bars of Snickers that weren't safe. So
Yeah, yeah, like oh,
uh,
there's a little hole in this one. There could be a needle in there.
uh-huh. And then I just found out when I was older, oh, he was just eating them. He was
Yeah,
taking my Snickers. Damn it.
my dad was probably doing that too, but. Oh man, yeah, this has run long. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. But this is good because the problem is we could just keep going on and going on and going
Oh
on.
yeah.
Like, there was like adult costumes that I really liked, and again, we did mention it in a previous episode, so I won't stop and repeat like what are our traditions that we do now. Obviously, we watch spooky movies, we decorate the house, we go trick or treating. I'm definitely gonna listen to the 13-minute version of the song Halloween by Halloween and Click Clack the Rattle Bag by Neil Gaiman on audiobook. Those are like my go-tos for when I'm driving somewhere. But
Hmm.
yeah, I had to mention them, but at the same time, I'm like, no, stop. We got to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, and this is one of those things we could absolutely do another gusher next year. We could even do specified gushers, like, you know what, this time around we're going to focus on candy and costumes, and this time around we're going to focus on TV specials and movies. Like, we could easily do this for years to come because it is such a fun holiday, and there are so many traditions, from when we were kids all the way up to now. So if this is an episode that you guys enjoy, let us know. Maybe we can start a regular tradition around this time and Christmas time about just stuff we remember.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we definitely tried to pack everything into this episode. And I'm glad we did. I'm glad it went long. This is going to be fun to listen to later. But, when I started this, I was like, yeah, let's just talk about trick-or-treating as a kid, and then I'll share a true crime story, and, like, we'll get in and out. But, man, it was like, no, there's more because we love Halloween.
Absolutely. One of the best holidays. I think it's weird when people don't like Halloween, honestly. Like, I'm like, why? Like, it's just so much fun.
On that note, I am really stoked that you're back with the Boogeyman's Closet this month with the, spooky season appropriate Halloween movie series episodes. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, yeah, we are just trying to jump right back in. It's still, the show itself is still kind of on rocky ground at the moment, only because our scheduling is so crazy. So as I mentioned in the first returning episode, we are going to be canceling the Patreon just because we cannot dedicate the amount of time needed to make it worthwhile, and it doesn't feel right charging people for that. So I am going to do a separate Patreon, mostly about artwork. So because I know there's at least 2 subscribers to the Patreon that the main reason they subscribed was for the artwork. So I'm like, well, what the hell? We'll transition over there if they want to keep getting the prints every year. Cool. I will gladly send those out. And I will definitely still have some unedited episodes on the Patreon, not just of Boogeyman's Closet, but of Member Bears and Munchies as well. But yeah, Halloween, it's unfortunately, I don't know why we decided to torture ourselves, because we came back with arguably 3 of the worst Halloween movies. I think one of the best, but I know a lot of people aren't crazy about H2O, but I love Halloween H2O. But yeah, we're covering Halloween 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5 and 6 are 2 of my most loathed in the entire franchise before we get to the Blumhouse ones. And watching Resurrection with a critical eye, I'm finding way more to hate about it than I remembered. So I'm definitely looking forward to talking about that. That will be coming out on Halloween itself. And then next month, I'm not sure exactly what we're doing, but I'm thinking we might come back to zombies because it's been a while.
Nice. Yeah. By the time listeners hear this episode, all the Halloween Boogeyman's Closet episodes will be out. So yeah, definitely go check those out. You should have lots of cool stuff to listen to this week of Halloween. Or, if you get behind, catch up over the weekend. There'll be a lot of cool Halloween specials, I'm sure, for this show, Boogeyman's Closet, and probably every other podcast, because a lot of people like to do Halloween specials. We just talked a whole lot about that. So you can find where to listen to those episodes at radpantheon.com or at radpantheon on all the socials. That's a super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, all sorts of collective people supporting each other to help spread the gospel of rad stuff. And both of our podcasts are members of that. You can check out more of this show at raisedbyrentals.com, at raisedbyrentals on the social media platforms. And once again, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, visit us on those socials, drop us a line, leave us a comment, leave us a podcast rating. Let us know what you love about Halloween. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes.
Lullabies and nightmares whisper low in the night where bat wings flow. That's where all the frightmares go when the elephants die. Would you like to try?
I got 5 pieces of candy. I got a chocolate bar. I got a quarter. I got a rock.